What's up, y'all? Back again today with a very special video. So today I have a question for you. And before I ask you that question, I want to set up the scene. So recently I was at work and me and a coworker were having a discussion. Along that discussion, the coworker happened to ask me, now mind you, this is an African American man, he asked me, do I like chitlins and do I eat chitlins? And mind you, we've had a few discussions before about the history of African Americans or blacks in America. So when he asked me this question, I'm not sure what position he was coming from. But it turns out he was genuinely asking me, do I like chitlins and do I eat chitlins? Now, if you're listening to this and you do not know what chitlins are, or they're also referred to as chiterlings, chitlins are basically, well, they are pig intestines, and they are prepared as a meal to eat. Now, this particular food and the method of cooking it is primarily eaten by African Americans. I want to give you some history in this video, and I want to ask you the same question that was asked to me. Do you eat chitlins? Do you eat chitlins? Now, I have to give you a history lesson before I say what I have to say. The first thing I have to say, and you do have to know this, is that as a black person in America, you need to know, every black person in America needs to know this information. As when we were enslaved as blacks in America, again, not saying that only black people were slaves before, because this has been topic of debate. I'm not saying that only black people were slaves, but when black people in America were enslaved from the transatlantic slave route, okay, due to chattel slavery, we were forced and made to eat chitlins. Now let me explain. The slave owner would eat a hog or a pig, and he would eat all the vital and meaty parts of this pig. He would eat, the shoulders, the rump roast. He would eat all the meaty and vital parts of the pig, if there were any. And realizing that he had to feed his slaves because he didn't want the slave to die, because if the slave died, then he or she cannot be of further value. So realizing that they had to feed their slave, the slave owner then gave their slaves whatever scraps were left from the pig after they had eaten. So this means that the pig tail, the pig's feet, and the pig's intestines and insides were all that were left for the black men and women who were working hard and not being compensated. At the end of the day, they were made to eat pig guts, which are now called chitlins. Now, that was a little bit of history. Let's not dwell too far in the past, but we must remember that this is a food that we were forced to eat. Now, moving forward to our conversation again at work, the gentleman asked me, do I like chitlins? Do I eat chitlins? And I said, no. To which he said, do you even eat our food? Quote unquote. This is what he said. Do you even eat our food? And this is where I have to explain my position. Now, first of all, I want to say that I disagree that chitlins are our food, meaning blacks in America are supposed to eat chitlins because that's our culture and that's what we choose to do and we have a reason to do so. I refuse that notion, sir, first of all. Secondly, let me now tell you my position. Why would any man or woman in America in 2017, once finding out the information that their ancestors were forced to eat this particular food, again, pig guts, they were forced to eat this, why would you in 2017, as a descendant of these people who were tortured and forced to eat this, why would you willingly accept and eat and prepare this food for yourself to eat? Now this is something that is not so easily answered, because then we have to bring tradition into it. This is why he asked me, do you not eat our food? Because traditionally we have to mention that in South Carolina there is actually a Chiterling fest, and an annual Chiterling fest where they come and cook the best chitlins around. And so this is to say that in large areas in the South, predominantly in America, there are families who, since the inception of that that food in slavery times, they have then taken that food and prepared it and used it as tradition, passing it down from generation to generation, but not passing down the knowledge of where it came from. So this is where we understand that many times in black families, they pass down certain things that may be detrimental. Because now we have to understand that, yes, this have been tradition, meaning that it is annual and reoccurring within the family structure, but it's not necessarily progressive. So this is why we can't push forward traditions to our children that are not progressive. We must understand knowledge and science. The knowledge of it is, first of all, where it came from should deter you from eating this food, even if you happen to like the taste. And secondly, we must understand that when our parents were making this food for us, they very likely didn't understand the dexterity of where this food came from, the deep suffering place that this food came from. So, moving forward, this is what I want to evaluate: the mental state of a people who will take on something and embrace something, whether it be progressive or non-progressive. Because then we could also speak about rap music, which I love rap music, but there are a lot of themes in rap music that we accept as tradition and we accept as part of our culture, when we know in actual life, if we reenact these things, that they're not going to be the best for us. So why don't we step back and reevaluate and say, okay, it's time for us to make a new set of traditions and values to live by, because we see that the old ways have got us to a point that is non-progressive. This is similar to, if you've ever seen maybe a video on YouTube where they put Coca-Cola into a little bottle, or not even a bottle, but they put Coca-Cola into a little bucket, and then they put a nail in there, like a metal nail or a bolt inside of the Coca-Cola, and they sit this metal inside of the Coca-Cola for maybe 3-4 days, maybe a week, maybe a month. And then when they come back to this piece of metal that's sitting in Coca-Cola, they realize that the metal has been dissolved and deteriorated and tarnished just from sitting in Coca-Cola. Now, with this knowledge, why is it that Americans, or people, anyone in general, would still put this same substance that would deteriorate metal? Why would they put this in their bodies constantly, day after day? Well, is it because they don't know, or is it because they are being willfully ignorant? In either case, we have to reevaluate and say, we have to do better. So with that being said, of course I didn't want to take too much of your time, but I wanted to ask you the question: do you eat chitlins? Do you know where chitlins came from? And furthermore, would you say that knowing where chitlins came from now, should we disregard that fact and still eat chitlins proudly and embrace it as our tradition? So should we not tell our children where this food came from and let them decide themselves where this food came from? On a side note, many people who eat chitlins actually say they cannot stand the smell when it's being cooked, and they actually don't necessarily like it, but it's just that it was passed down from them. So we have to see why this is a problem. Last thing I wanted to mention is, on a side note from all of this, is just from a physical standpoint, eating such things as pig intestines and pig feet is actually one of the largest reasons why there's so much health issues within the African American community. On one hand, we say, oh, my mom and my grandmother and my great-grandmother had high blood pressure, and so I'm going to have high blood pressure. But we're not evaluating or putting into the equation the fact that you're also eating and living the same ways that your parent and your grandparent and your great-grandparent live. So obviously you're going to have the same results. Again, this is why we have to evolve and realize our position. This is why we were put on this planet, to realize our position and try to move forward. Of course, I don't want to take too much of your time, but please, let's step away from anything that's not progressive. That means mind frames, that means activities, and yes, even foods. So please, I need you to vibrate higher.